On this episode of the podcast, I'm going to talk about ScoMo, hurt feels, and corporates. That could be a fun one. Let's get into it. So, have you ever come across somebody or been in a situation where somebody's name, or you've talked to somebody and their name's very similar to somebody who is... It can be mistaken for somebody else. Well, last week I think it was, I was at the doctor, or seeing my one of my healthcare professionals, and we were in their office and we were just talking about some things. Anyway, somebody called and said, "Oh yeah, I've got Scott Morrison on the phone." Okay, Scott Morrison. Now, Scott Morrison is the name of the Prime Minister. So I'm like, sitting back and thinking, oh, isn't that hilarious? This guy's name's Scott Morrison, the same name as the PM. Lol. I didn't actually do that, but I was like, oh, that's funny. Anyway, so Scott, Samantha answered the phone and she's like, hello. And the guy said his name was Craig. I'm like, okay, so she was talking to this guy and she hung up, and then she said, did he say his name was Craig? And I said, yeah, I think he did. And she's like, okay. So then she sort of talked to the secretary again, and she said, are you sure this guy's name's Scott? And she's, okay, Scott Morrison's on the phone, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, well, whatever happened, she had to look at something and call him back. But I said, oh, yeah, got ScoMo, good old ScoMo on the phone. And she's like, oh, yeah, Scott Morrison's the Prime Minister. So we sort of had a laugh about that. And then, she was like, did he call himself Scott on the phone? And we were like, and she sort of said, well, I said, no, I think he said Craig. So, yeah, she talked to his this story's gone just everywhere. But she talked to his secretary again and said, like, is this guy's name Scott? I think he said Craig. And the secretary's like, oh, yeah, that's right, his name's Craig, it's not Scott. Because Samantha goes, you know who Scott Morrison is. Scott Morrison is the Prime Minister, like ScoMo. And she goes, oh, yeah. Sort of like, oh, of course, yeah, no, the guy's name's Craig, not Scott. Oh, so we had a bit of a laugh about that. And, but she's like, oh, Scott Morrison's on the phone. And the guy's, oh, yeah, it's Craig here. And sort of, they were chatting, Craig and Samantha were chatting. And she got a phone. And she's like, did he say his name was Craig? I don't think he said it was Scott. And I said, no, I don't think it was. And it was like, you got old ScoMo on the phone. And it's like, nah, his name's actually Craig, not Scott. So she wasn't talking to ScoMo. She wasn't talking to the Prime Minister. She wasn't talking to old ScoMo. Now, here's a quick little side story on ScoMo. I don't know how ScoMo started being called ScoMo, but ScoMo loves being called ScoMo. So a friend of mine, or a colleague of mine, Scott Morrison used to be the treasurer, and he was calling in for an interview on the radio once, and my colleague said that, he said that, these are his words. She told me this is what he said. He said, hello, it's Scott Morrison, the treasurer, it's ScoMo. And I said to her, so you're not going to know who Scott Morrison is. You're not going to know who the treasurer is. But as soon as he says, oh, it's ScoMo, you're going to be like, I know exactly who it is. A bit of a backstory. Well, it's not really a backstory, but a bit of a fun little story there. Good old ScoMo. Loves it. Now, this next story, I was going to talk about last time, and then I teased it. And then this morning, I thought to myself, should I talk about this or not? But anyway, I'm gonna. So, a few weeks ago, I was probably rather dramatic to say that I had my heart broken, but I at least got squeezed a bit. Like, it wasn't ripped out, but it was squeezed a bit. I was pretty wound up and emotional about something. I was actually quite surprised how sad and emotional I got. So, there's this nice young lady, and I have some feels for them, and I have done for quite a while. Like, I'm going to say probably almost 2 years. I got to throw that out there because we work together. Well, we don't work together as much now as what we used to because we've sort of in the company we've gone up the ladder a little bit. We've gone a few different directions, so we don't work together now as much as we used to. But we used to work together a bit more. And when we used to work together a bit more, there was a time where she went away for a few months on a holiday, and I really missed her. And I think from there. Well, I did miss her, and I think from there some feels started to manifest. So I'm a person who I think I can be friends with a woman, a lady, whatever. It's no problem, but I don't know how to take it up and be the boyfriend, as it were. Okay, so. So I've talked to, it's like everybody in the office knows, not really, but I've talked to some friends and some colleagues who about this, and they're like, they gave me some tips and they said what they think I should do and whatever. Anyway, so I got to a situation where I thought, I'm going to tell this person, I'm going to express to Sandra, good old Sandra, how I feel, and if she wanted to go out, awesome. If she didn't, I just wanted a yes or a no situation. I was like, do you want to, do you not? Okay. So one day I saw Sandra and she was a bit busy, she had to go, but I said to her, look, I want to talk to you about something. And she's like, oh, okay. Not that I have it another time, so another day. And I thought to myself, I've got to put some sort of time frame on this. So I said, well, how about, Tuesday or whatever? And she was like, oh, like a bit uncommittal. She's a bit of a uncommittal. I suppose it probably depends, but it was a bit uncommittal. Anyway, so like Monday morning, right? I sent her a message just saying, oh, can we still meet up tomorrow? Or are we okay to meet up tomorrow? So I can talk to you about this thing. Now, I'll say when I saw her to sort of set this up, I did say, look, I can meet you at the office. We can walk back to your car and, I'll spill on the way sort of thing or whatever. So I floated that as an option. Anyway, so later, well, actually that night, I got a text. And I won't go into what the message said, but I was, I was quite hurt. I was surprised how sort of like emotionally invested I was. I was quite hurt. And I had a little bit of I'll be honest, I had a little bit of a cry. And then I was, I've been through a roller coaster of emotions. I was, then angry and very unhappy. I thought, why couldn't she have told me these things when I saw her? And then I was like in one of those real bitter, salty moods where it was like, oh, geez, whatever. She doesn't deserve me type situations. And then I was in like a bit of maybe it's not supposed to happen now. Maybe like in 2 or 3 years, it's something that might happen. So I've been through all array of emotions. Now, when I think I'm over it now, because when I think about the situation and think about her, I don't really feel anything different than what I did previously, if that makes sense. Or I don't feel unhappy, I don't feel angry, I don't feel sad, I don't feel like I want to have a little bit of a shed a tear or anything about it all. So I think I may be over it, but yeah, I was pretty emotional. And I think maybe because, as I said, I'm not really somebody who makes a move. So maybe because I decided I wanted to maybe see how it goes with this particular person, maybe I was a bit more invested, and henceforth I was a bit more sad and a bit more wound up. But yeah, well, I suppose, that's how it goes. My goodness. That's a long story, but yeah, so I thought, a faint heart never won a fair lady, so I might try something, and I suppose I sort of wasn't, given an opportunity for it all to work out, for what I guess wanted to happen, but anyway, it doesn't, I was going to say it doesn't matter, but it did to me, and I think it still does a little bit, but I'm slowly, getting on from things, so, yeah. I don't think Sally listens to the podcast. She's never mentioned to me about it, so, anyway, if she's listening to this, I was wound up. Now, last story. Let's quickly talk about corporates and corporates moving into a public space. Now, in Melbourne, I'm going to try and get through this story pretty quickly because the podcast is running long. Oh, it's running long at 12 minutes. Oh, anyway, now in Melbourne at Federation Square, if you've ever been to Melbourne, you've ever been to Fed Square, it is a big area where there are some buildings there. There's a restaurant. There's like a big screen on the side of one of the buildings where people go, and they have big sporting events on there, and everybody congregates and watches these sporting events. They have markets there. It's just a great cultural public space in a pretty prime location in Melbourne. Now, what was proposed to happen there was, I think it was last year, Apple were like, yeah, we want to build a big, ugly store here. And let me tell you, I had seen pictures of the store, some drawings, and it was absolutely disgusting. It did not fit at all with the other buildings in Fed Square. So as a result of this, people got very wound up. They were very unhappy. They didn't want a corporate entity moving into their public space, which personally I think that is 100% fine. And a building had to be demolished as a result for the monstrosity of an Apple store to be built, and whatever else. And there was a bit of a backdoor deal done with the Victorian government to, I believe, to sort of facilitate Apple to be able to get in and build their store. However, and I've got to say, I don't really have a stake in this, but I really did feel that there shouldn't be a retail store at this particular place, right? So things have escalated, and an application had to be lodged with a heritage council, and they knocked back Apple's proposal. They knocked back the store. So the Apple store in Federation Square in Melbourne probably, I think it's dead. It's not going to happen. But this just got me thinking about public space, and with corporate entities, big retail chains, big companies moving in, building stores, getting into those spaces. Is it right? Is it wrong? Tweet me, send me an email on this. In this particular case, I think Apple have lost, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Well, that is it for this episode of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was okay. I don't think it's not as jolly, right, as some of the other ones. We got a bit in depth with some things there. Now, look, you can tweet me at L_who's_talking. We're on Facebook. You can send me an email, LukeWho'sTalking pod@gmail.com. Also, I am thinking about working on a book, a Luke Who's Talking book, where I just basically write the stories that I say on the podcast in a book, and if you want to buy it, you can. So if you have any thoughts on that, should I do it, should I not? I've sort of started. Well, when I say I've started, I've done like a cover page. So yeah, if you have any thoughts on that, send us an email, tweet me, whatever else. And hey, I'll catch you next time on the podcast. Hope you enjoy these next couple of weeks until I talk to you next time. See ya.